Hello and welcome to this episode of Kickstarter Contemplations. So today I'm going to be taking a quick look at Bardsung, Tale of the Forsaken Glade, which is the new Bardsung game currently on GameFound. And as you can see, it's raised over £500,000. It's way beyond its success. It'll definitely be getting made. So I mainly wanted to talk about this because I did a review on Bardsung a few months ago, and I was pretty harsh on it in the end. And while there's a lot of good points to the game, I did basically say that it became a very tedious affair because the game was extremely grindy. You know, it was a lot of repeating the exact same quest over and over again. So basically, in Bardsung, the Ancient Forge, which was the first game, a very typical dungeon crawling board game. And you'd make your way through the dungeon, you'd fight the monsters, and you'd come across random events, and you'd get the big end boss at the end of the campaign, and that would be that, basically. But the campaign just went on and on and on, doing essentially the same mission with the same objective over and over again, and it wasn't even an interesting objective. It was reach the end of the map and find the exits. So I found the game very, very tedious after a good few games. However, the first few games that I played, I really did enjoy. So I thought I'd take a look at this and see what they have done that is different, because I was watching a video by Always Bored, Never Boring, which is a very good channel, talks a lot about old dungeon crawlers, a lot of videos on Hero Quest, that kind of thing. And he was talking about some of the changes that have been made and what Steamforged have done to kind of address the concerns, which I'm assuming I wasn't the only person who was a bit underwhelmed by the repetitive nature of the game. So if we take a scroll down the Kickstarter page, you can see, so it's the Forsaken Glade, so it's based in a forest now rather than a dungeon, and the miniatures of all the enemies that we can see here kind of reflect that. You know, there's a lot more fays and elves and that sort of business. There's still your usual goblins and that sort of thing. So let's take a quick look at what they're saying about this. So remastered gameplay, that is the first thing that really appeals to me, because, like I say, the gameplay wasn't terrible, but it was a little bit simple, and just doing a very simple gameplay mechanic over and over again, you know, it's not the most interesting of things to do. We've got sprawling narrative campaign. Yeah, that's the same as before. It was a very sprawling narrative campaign, that too. And then we can see a deep hero customization. And what's interesting here is looking at these hero cards here, immediately I can see there is a couple of differences. One is there is a die listed on the ability card here called Polearm Slash. And it's also got this little +2 modifier here. So in the first iteration of Bardsung, each hero rolled a dice, like, for that hero. So one particular hero would always roll a d6, one would always roll a d4, and your modifiers would be on your character board. Whereas in this one, it looks as if each attack will roll a specific type of die, and it will have a specific modifier. So the basic mechanics of how Bardsung worked in the original game was you would roll a d20 to hit, and then if you hit, you would roll your character's kind of weapon die, so d6, d4, d8, whatever kind of weapon it was they used, and that would determine how much damage you did. The d20 roll to hit would be modified by various stats you would upgrade over the course of the campaign, which there is kind of an issue with the d20, that while you do get a lot of variation because it's 1 to 20, you always have the same chance of rolling a 1 as you do a 20. And that kind of means you often get modifiers in games that use d20s. You know, the Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is the most famous one for this. And this kind of creates a bit of an issue where, if you know how to sort of game the system, you will end up with modifiers that just means you never miss with a certain attack or whatever it might be. And I did find throughout the play of the Bardsung campaign in the Ancient Forge, it did kind of get to a point where I was just always guaranteed to hit pretty much. So I'd be getting +4 to a d20 roll, and a lot of enemies you would need to roll like say a 10 to hit them, for example, and that means really you'll need to roll a 6, and of course it means you've got 14 out of 20 chances of hitting. So that's kind of my issue with the d20. It seems to rely a lot on modifiers and things like that. And that's kind of the old gameplay of Bardsung, though. So this looks to be something a bit different, and I do know a little bit of how it works, but we'll come on to the new Bardsung gameplay in a moment. I'll just have a quick look down here. So we've got stunning and grotesque miniatures, and this was the real selling point for Bardsung. Was the miniatures were fantastic. They were so good. They were some of the best miniatures I've seen in a board game. And they were just really nice to paint as well. I really, really liked the miniatures. And it looks like we've got some interesting new types of miniature. This chap looks like he's just made pretty much completely out of hands. He's just a pair of arms here, and then he's got these hands hanging over his face. Very monstrous, appropriately grotesque look to him, just as promised. Immersive artwork, the artwork was very nice too, and that does look to be continuing there. We've got a monstrous black dragon, so we've got this huge black dragon miniature. It might be, but it doesn't actually look as big as the giant demon miniature that came with Bardsung, the Ancient Forge. It was just a really, really over-the-top miniature. It was really cool, but it was a little bit big. It was a bit too much. This looks more like that kind of appropriately sized massive centerpiece for a big boss battle. Okay, so a free upgrade pack. That's pretty cool. So if you back this and you are a returning backer to Bardsung, so if you backed the first Bardsung game, it looks like you are going to get an upgrade pack to bring it in line with the new rules, which could be a new lease of life for the old Bardsung game. Okay, so you've got your pledge values. So what have we got here? Deluxe pledge, $255 or £196. So it's not too cheap, but let's have a quick look what you get with it. So 2 big boxes, monstrous black dragon. So you've got your, I'm guessing this is all the core set stuff here. So you've got the Forsaken Glade map, you can see there underneath all the miniatures. Obviously all these nicely sculpted miniatures, and a set of 5 heroes. Plenty of dice by the looks of it. And then you also get the Futile Crusade expansion, which again, some more miniatures, which, look at this abomination. That's really nicely sculpted. Looks like a sentient tree in armor or something, maybe. It looks kind of like an armored war tree. Last cogs here, Sentinel, Devourer. These look like almost like clockwork robots made out of wood instead of metal, which is an interesting design. And then you've got the Legends expansion, which includes all unlocks. So I'm guessing the Legends expansion is just what they're calling the stretch goals. So, chosen heroes. So these are the unlocks so far. So you've got a new hero, the Necromancer, the Forge Warden. What else have we got? We've got the Fate Song, the Stoneheart, the Night Feather. Oh, that's a nice sculpt of the Night Feather. The Night Feather was a hero. It was like the rogue assassin type hero in Bardsung, the Ancient Forge, and he was a pretty cool character. But his miniature was a little bit underwhelming. He was just a little tiny bird man. They've given him a really dynamic pose here, make him look a lot more threatening, which is pretty cool. Got the Swift Claw, Light Weaver. This is cooler. This Glade Strider. So you could have got a Glade Strider in the original Bardsung, and it was just a basic centaur. But I like how this guy looks like he's got a bit more of a Viking theme to him or something. He looks like he's got the body of maybe a bear or a lion, perhaps. That's pretty cool. The Lion Soul, the Wild Shell. It's like another sort of resculpt there of the Wild Shell from the first game. It was like this big turtle type mage sort of character. Bosses. So we've got the Horde Wrecker. Again, like there's not a lot to say about these because they are just such high quality miniatures that come with this series of games. Look at this guy, the Bile Belch. It's like stomach's also a mouth with this great big tongue hanging out. It's really creative, really cool design. I'm guessing Alashandra here is probably an elf of some kind. I'm pretty sure this Bardsung, the Forsaken Glade, features elves as kind of its one of its main enemies. And then the Unnamed, which just looks like some horrific monstrosity. Artwork. Let's just scroll down. Here are the heroes you will begin with in Bardsung the Forsaken Glade. So you've got the Fire Soul. This ember of a hero flares into an all-consuming inferno. She'll douse any flame to aid a friend and reduce enemies to ashes. And looks like she's riding around on a goat. That looks like a burning goat. Or maybe it's like a demonic goat she summons or something. That's pretty cool. The Skull Splitter. So the Skull Splitter looks pretty silly to me. Fueled by the same frenzy, Skull Splitter unleashes. Yeah, so he's basically a berserker type character by the looks of it. And yeah, I'm not a fan of that miniature. These what do you even call these? Like scythes, axes, swords. I don't know really what to call these weapons he's using. I'd say it's like a Klingon bat'leth from Star Trek, but he's got two of them. It's far too big. It's far too over the top. I'm not a fan of that miniature, to be honest. I think it just looks a little bit ridiculous. Nicely sculpted and everything, but it's just so unrealistic. The Demon Blade. Witness the bell toll and lightning score the earth, and cross not this warlock. Swift and fueled by souls of the fallen, Demon Blade thirsts for far more than glory. This is a pretty cool miniature. I quite like the double-ended sword. It's a little bit silly, but it looks pretty cool for a necromancer type character, and some nice movement there in the miniature. I like that one. I like the Demon Blade. The Dawn Guard. So the Dawn Guard is another returning character class who was basically the tank for the original Bardsung. And yeah, you can very clearly see this is a very tanky character, huge shield and shoulder pads. That's pretty cool, very high fantasy sort of look. At the Pathseeker, so you've got an archer, patient and prepared. Pathseeker looks ahead and beyond, laying traps to pick off enemies and keeping a careful eye on the party's supplies. I quite like how they've designed them like a kind of a Mongolian archer, rather than usual sort of elven or Robin Hood style look. That's pretty cool. I like the hawk and the Mongolian style dress and the recurve bow. So gameplay. So this is the bit I'm the most interested in, as this is what they have supposedly revamped. So customize a multiclass, find and equip precious loot. Yeah, so that's very similar to the first game. You find loot, you equip it, it makes you more powerful. That sort of thing. You earn XP and upgrade, and the ability to upgrade abilities as well. So this looks fairly similar. However, so here's a difference. Fate was a resource in the first game in the Ancient Forge, but it was kind of a party-wide resource, so everybody shared the fate of the party. Whereas in the Forsaken Glade, each character will have their own pool of fate, so you'll have your own resource to manage for your own abilities, rather than having to decide who gets to use it. And this little kind of musical note icon here is the fate symbol. So this ability Finisher, it requires a fate to use. So the marching order looks like that makes a return, which was essentially like their name for the initiative track, which this was one of the coolest mechanics in the game. I really liked how you can kind of see it here in this image, that each hero has an ID card that goes in the marching order, but the enemies themselves, their ID card and stat card doubles as the same thing in the marching order. So you have this nice track laid out in front of you that's got the stats and abilities for all the enemies on the board right there, kind of built into the marching order, so you're not looking in several different places. And the enemies are quite nicely laid out with their stats, very easy to read. There's a little bit of iconography in the game, but a reference sheet always helps with that, and it's not too complex. And then it looks as if the intelligent combat. So yes, that's just saying it. Every combat's a little puzzle. It looks like there's a return of the enemy's AI cards as well, that they will follow specific behaviours, which is pretty good, because it sort of it makes the enemies a little bit more. It makes the enemies do things that are a little bit more intelligent. It's not just a simple oh well, this enemy's going to move and attack the closest hero. You know, they might go for the hero who's taken the most wounds or something like that. They might behave a little bit differently depending on what AI cards they use. These were quite nice in the Ancient Forge as well. You'd come across these challenge cards, and to be honest, the combat got so repetitive. I looked forward a lot more to coming across these challenge cards where you'd come across NPCs or, you know, rusty levers or locked boxes or things like that. You know, you kind of event encounter card sort of thing. And there were some really interesting ones in there too that were kind of the highlights of the game for me. And this here, yeah, boss encounter. So there's a return of the boss sort of characters. Great miniature there on this this Packmaster War Chief, like this big armoured knight sort of guy with these war dogs on a chain. This is really nice, that. Really good miniature. And the bosses were pretty good as well. The way they worked with having like multiple activation cards. So a lot of the stuff looks to be the same as the original Bardsung game. Which, like I said, I don't want to go too deeply into the mechanics of the old game because they're obviously updating it. But it was very, you know, like I said earlier, it's very simple sort of roll to hit, roll the damage. Enemies would all have 1 or 2 health, so it would be quite quick. You know, oftentimes as long as you hit, you would usually do enough damage to finish an enemy off. Only 1 or 2 would take sort of a team effort to bring down. Then we've got Wandering Monsters. So Wandering Monsters make a return. They were in the original game as well, which would just sort of be a token that kind of moved around the board. But I have seen that it works a little bit differently in this. The core experience, so you get 64 miniatures, 800 plus cards, 240 plus tokens, cloth bag, which I don't remember there being a cloth bag used for anything in the first game. So that'll be interesting to see. A cloth bag usually means like a hidden draw mechanic, so I wonder how that will work. I don't believe there was a cloth bag in Bardsung the Ancient Forge. 18 dice, so plenty of dice, game board, adventure book, rulebook. Immersive campaign involving map and storyline, challenging combat puzzles, deep hero customization, 2 core boxes for Kallax friendly storage. Nice to know it'll fit on a Kallax shelf. So we've got a playmat, which was the same as in the first game, where it kind of defined the edges of the board. And then we have these tiles, which you'll place down as you move through the map. You know, these are the bits that you move your miniatures on, but the tiles can never be outside of this playmat. At least that's how it was in the first game. I'm assuming that's staying the same. These hex tokens, I happen to know these are the Wandering Monster tokens, and they kind of move around on the playmat, and if they ever enter one of the tiles that your heroes are on, then a Wandering Monster will be placed and give you a new fight to have a go at. So we've got tons of tokens there, and then there's just the rest of the components. So that's basically it. One of the big changes I know that is what sort of piqued my interest the most, I sort of thought I'd save this for the end, is that the D20 mechanic has been replaced with a 2d6 mechanic. Instead of rolling a d20, you'll roll a 2d6. So 2 6-sided dice is a little bit more interesting than re-rolling a d20, because even though the numbers you roll are between 2 and 12 rather than 1 and 20, there is, of course, less range of numbers. But the average roll on 2 6-sided dice, for whatever magical mathematical reason that I'm not smart enough to understand, the average result is pretty much usually a 7. That allows you to do like slightly more interesting things with mechanics, where you can assume a roll of 7 is going to be your usual roll, and so you can actually work both ways, whereas most games will be rolling higher gets you a better result. Using 2 6-sided dice, you can play around with that and say, oh, actually, to complete this challenge, you need to roll a 5 or less. Or, of course, you need to roll a 7 or more. I don't know exactly what they'll do with it. It will probably be the usual higher numbers equals good, lower numbers equals bad. But using 2 6-sided dice also allows you to do more interesting things, like instead of just having an ability that says, oh, you can re-roll your attack dice, you can maybe re-roll one of your attack dice. And then there's also things that can trigger differently. So, for For example, in Bardsung the Ancient Forge, a roll of a 20 would give you a critical hit. Now, I don't know what it's going to be in this game. It might be a roll of a 12, which would require a double 6, of course. That's the only way to get a 12 on a 2d6 roll. But they could, instead of doing that, saying anytime you roll a double, you get a critical hit. You know, there's interesting things that you can do with 2 dice rather than 1, even with that low range of numbers, which I just think that looks more interesting. I don't think I'll be backing this one because I just kind of found the first game very tedious, and that's kind of left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But if you haven't played Bardsung before, and this does look intriguing to you, don't let my jaded opinion put you off, because steamforged games are pretty good. I love their Resident Evil games. I think they're fantastic. And other than the repetitive nature of Bardsung, which it doesn't say anything in this game found page about how they're structuring the campaign, because that's the main issue I had with it. Was sort of you'd play, say, 10 chapters to complete the campaign, but each chapter would consist of like 5 or 6 games you would play, and pretty much all of those games in a chapter would be the same thing. Travel through the dungeon, find the exits. Okay, rebuild the dungeon, and it would be the same randomly determined dungeon, and you'd be coming up against a lot of the same monsters over and over again. Even though there were lots of monsters in the box, each chapter would kind of have maybe 4 or 5 different types at the most, and so it became a very repetitive affair. And unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be too much in this game found page about how they're going to structure the campaign, so I'm not convinced enough to back this just yet. However, I will be watching it with a level of interest, and when it comes to retail, I might consider giving it a go, just to see what the improvements are like, because I do like the fact that they've listened to criticisms of the original game, and hopefully they have done a good job in improving it. Everything I've seen so far sounds good, sounds like an improvement. I just don't want to have to play 30 games of the same exact mission again near enough to complete a campaign, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, and that's really all I have to say about this. I know it's not anything amazingly insightful, but I just wanted to share my thoughts because Bardsung was a game that I really, really wanted to love. I loved the miniatures, loved the artwork, loved the idea of it, but it just failed in its execution, and I just felt so bad that I couldn't enjoy the game, and I ended up having to sell it on. Thanks for watching, and I hope this has given you a little bit of an idea about this game if you didn't know anything else. Of course, there's some great videos out there. I would really recommend Always Bored, Never Boring's video on it. That's a really good one. And yeah, I will be back with another video at another time. So, bye.